Hello, everyone. I'm Lakai Newman with Soda. Thank you for joining today's call. Today's webinar is a look back at 2023 and a discussion for operational priorities for the year ahead. This webinar was developed in partnership with Kantata, and we're joined by agency leaders Brian Williams of Viget, Andrew Howlett of Struck, and Brent Trimble of Kantata, who will also moderate this session. Together, they'll chat through retention challenges and opportunities, navigating the changing agency landscape, AI and emerging trends, and much more. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Brent to get us going.
Thanks, and it's great to be with everybody today and listen firsthand to gain some insights from two agency leaders on the front lines as we wind down what's been, for many folks, a challenging 2023 and look ahead to next year and some of the early indicators that will govern and kind of dictate potentially the kind of year we're going to have. I thought Brian and Andrew, it'd be great to get a little just insight and intro from both of you about your role and your firm. So Brian at Viget and Andrew at Struck. And since we're in the Zoom carousel, and Brian, you are up first, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the firm.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. So Brian Williams, co-founder and CEO of Viget. So we started the agency way back in 1999. Been doing this a long time. And we are a sort of a mix of a web agency and a product studio. So we do a lot of custom software development, pretty technical stuff mixed with the traditional creative work that you see a lot of soda agencies able to do. And we're about 60 people right now, fully independent, all based in the US. We have 4 offices located in the US. In terms of my kind of role and background as a CEO, I've kind of worn every hat there is to wear here. Started my career as a developer, so I have more of kind of a technical background from those early days. But now, kind of address whatever the highest priority, most important work is in a given stretch of time. This year, that's obviously been a lot of biz dev and kind of revenue focus. So happy to get into that more. But pass the mic over to Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, Andrew Howlett. Been around the agency world, around Soda since sort of the beginning, and been around 20 plus years in the industry. More recently, I joined Struck as CEO and a largest shareholder with the organization. Struck really focuses on experience transformation as part of sort of the digital and business transformation three-legged stool. We have a practice that does a lot of physical space design, as well as our digital and our creative branding, brand awareness, campaign type work that we've done for years and years.
Oh, that's great, and appreciate you both joining as we hurtle to the holiday break. For context, I'm going to just share my screen briefly. We're going to reference a State of the Agency Operations survey that we were able to commission earlier this year that canvassed lots of different agency principals, which would have been Q1, Q2 of this year, and some of the challenges that they were facing, as well as where they could see the rest of the year going and a little bit into 2024. So we'll pull some vignettes from this. And I encourage everybody in the chat, we're going to post the link and you can download this report. It's got some things that'll be probably familiar to most participants today, as well as maybe some things that are illuminating. But I guess, we'll start with the sort of omnipresent elephant in the room around the bumpy economic year we've all been experiencing. But we'll start with a couple of highlights and some research notes. In the research, around 60% of agency principals said their biggest challenge this year was net new client acquisition, and that, of course, is no surprise. Obviously, when clients sort of sort of retrench a little bit with marketing spend. I mean, the natural inclination once a current client has kind of capped their budget to go after some net new. What, you know, what have you guys been experiencing? How have you approached kind of the downturn in business and revenue first? And have you experienced or retooled or refactored maybe new business operations in any kind of way as a result of this year? I guess maybe Brian, we could start with you, or Andrew. It looks
Sure.
like you're queuing up.
Andrew, you go, man. This is a
Yeah.
fun time.
Well,
Have at it.
yeah, lots to say here. It has been a challenging year. I would say a challenging year and a half, for us at least, and I don't know whether that plays out for everyone else, but the global uncertainty, and I think uncertainty is the right word. Uncertainty when in the market for our types of agencies and services lends itself to people just not wanting to either sign or embark on new endeavors or efforts, tend to sort of want to reuse what they have. Thankfully, and I'm not going to call it luck. I'm going to call it really smart strategic thinking, probably more luck than anything. We started some really retooling our positioning a couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago. We started that process. We also started to retool and rethink the way that we price, the way that we propose, our whole sales effort. So coming into things, we were actually, I would say, a little bit ahead of others. Not that it's completely helped us, but I think just based on the data from the research and what you shared, as well as what we're hearing from others, we maybe fared a little better than others in that regard. But really honing in on that position, what we do well, because in that uncertainty, people don't want to hire somebody who they don't have that level of confidence with. And so I think that's important for all of us to take a look at it. If somebody's going to hire something and spend some money in an uncertain time, they don't want to, they want to reduce their risk as much as possible. And one of those levers, of course, is somebody who is uniquely positioned to help them and address that. The other piece is we've really, we've followed some of the methodologies and some of the things that are out there, including sort of the Blair Enns, Win Without Pitching, David C. Baker, the way that they approach business. We really tried to stop addressing, going after RFPs, start going after all those things that in the past can be very expensive and time consuming, and more about conversations and helping to identify whether they're good, a potential client is a good fit for us, and if we're a good fit for them early on. So more of the conversations than decks and sharing, credentials and all those things, because they should have a pretty good sense of who we are and what we do even before they even reach out to us. So those are some of the things that we've been doing. Again, it doesn't change the fact that the market is uncertain and is very volatile, but it has helped us at least.
So some retooling, positioning, for relevance, and it sounds like if you're talking to Blair, and I know a lot of SOTA participants are really sort of adherents of him and his, and Tim Williams is a big advocate of this as well. We've done some podcasts with both of them, as well as some webinars. Really specificity, why you're relevant, going after kind of a unique positioning. You've taken this time to take a breath, take a pause, refine that a bit. So how about you, Brian, in the context of, I guess, revenue and the bumpiness, what things we're going to get into, things like more operational, like talent retention in the wild swings, but in terms of the research and of course the overwhelming number of the respondents saying net new revenue acquisition, of course, being a priority, what have you guys been doing?
Yeah, we had a tough year, kind of a little bit different timing than Andrew maybe. Beginning of the year was reasonably strong for us. My reaction to this year, over 23 years of being in doing this type of work, this was the fastest swing from being really busy, lots of client demand, ability to hit strong rates and close business quickly, to the opposite, where new business slowed down dramatically, existing accounts pulled back. And Andrew used the word uncertainty, which I think is right. I mean, in the 2008 financial crisis, there was certainty that that nothing was going to happen. It felt
Right.
different. It felt like, okay, we're pausing everything until we're through this. Whereas this year for me has felt more difficult because it wasn't always obvious that something wasn't going to happen. You know, projects were delayed, decisions were delayed, weeks and sometimes months, and then maybe shelved entirely. We had a lot more often than other years. We had a lot of verbal confirmations for one work or commitments that seemed like they were going to go ahead. And then, a month later it would get pulled back. So it made decision making on internally with our agency that much more difficult. We did have to go through layoffs for the first time in 23 years, which is completely, brutal in so many ways. But part of what made it so hard was that uncertainty and a lack of clarity about what work would be coming in when, and where we might be able to place people. So it was very challenging in that way. I think in terms of reacting to it, we've been fortunate to build a really strong alumni network at Viget. So we get a decent amount of opportunities through that alumni network, people either directly with clients that have hired Viget alum or introductions and people kind of in the kind of know us well and can loop us in that way. I definitely think while we are open to responding to RFPs and happy to have that fun debate with Blair sometime, to me it's a matter of why you deserve to win an opportunity and then what you'll do to win that. And so having a connection inside an organization where it's not just responding to kind of a blind opportunity, I think is important. But when things are light and you're kind of scrambling to win work, I think being open to a variety of ways to win it is important. But that's where founder-led sales is so important, and having leaders that have strong networks and can go out and get the right opportunities in the door is always going to be part of that process. But there's other there's more sustainable long-term tools that you can use that we can talk about, but that kind of aggressive outreach to reconnect with people is always going to be part of the mix.
So you touched on sort of that wild swing and that pivot, having been very atypical from previous downturns, right? I mean, increased money supply, sort of a massive rebound after COVID, lots of client demand, particularly I think if you were in the DTC space. Of course, healthcare has always been strong, travel and tourism, kind of that revenge travel, getting back from COVID, just booming. And then a almost not screeching halt, like to your point in 2008, but real downshift. And there's been so much printed, and the volume of press generated just over the war for talent, particularly in the agency space, and the inability to match the economics of, for instance, big tech and hire competitively, with those salaries. What kind of swing are you seeing? Maybe it'll start with you in that notion of that wild pendulum around that. Is there a silver lining there? Obviously, doing a staff reduction is always painful, and the hope with the strong cultures you can bring some of those people back over time. But how do you see that playing out, both I think now and then maybe in the medium term?
I mean, for me, there's an element of it that is healthy. The degree to which big tech was overhiring in the post-COVID boom got to be ridiculous, and the salary pressures were dramatic. And you just had economics that didn't make any sense, and companies that were, whether it's because of their funding situation or just the way that budgets were available with little regard to the cost of money, it kind of turned everything upside down. So to me, things now are almost a little bit more normal than they were a couple of years ago, and in that sense, feels a little bit more stable, even though it's less fun from a revenue generation standpoint. Certainly from a talent perspective, who's available on the market, what the salary demands are, the retention challenges that we faced a couple of years ago have swung back in the other direction. So it's the new business challenges are there, but the staff retention challenges are not. Those have become more kind of back to normal in that sense. So I think that's going to be, that's largely a positive. I think we're seeing a course correction from, a world of tech and people that hire agencies to kind of implement new technology, where there was an assumption that we were compressing 10 years of growth into 2 years or whatever the ideas were last year, that are just not happening. And so we're kind of unwinding that, and seeing a lot of people getting pushed back out of tech. And that sort of disruption and chaos creates a lot of confusion on the client side. Should I hire an agency? Should I hire in-house? What talent do I need? What are these different roles? I mean, there's constant change in all of that. And I think that's creates an exciting time for agencies that can navigate it well, because you kind of can help educate clients on what the different roles really are, what the services they might really need, how they can generate real value, short-term, long-term, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's reasons for optimism, but it's definitely a chaotic time. That's what we're seeing.
So Andrew, I'd love to get your vantage point on this. It was interesting in the research that, and again, a lot of medium to large agency principals kind of just responding with their different challenges. And one that was kind of interesting, that even though there's been this swing back, to Brian's point around the inflated expectations of maybe big tech and not having to compete with those, and some balancing in the market, there's still like something like 25 to 30% of these principals saying they're still challenged with really balancing their staff and against profitability. But in the context of talent, and maybe start with near term, and then how your experience living through this year, and then what you think is coming. How have you adapted and evolved?
Yeah, I agree with the pendulum sentiment, and it swung way faster than anything I've ever seen in the past. Swung one direction really quickly, and then kind of swung back. And I think the hard thing for us now, really around retention, is understanding the model of in office versus out of office. Remote versus in person, and expectations that I think were, again, that pendulum swung quickly of everybody's, all these companies, and when you have the huge companies and they're making headlines of we're fully remote. Well, now those same companies are saying we need you back in the office, we need you back here. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. We could spend hours just talking about that whole piece. But I think from a creative agency, or the soda agencies and other agencies, collaboration is key. Collaboration is super important. And no matter how incredible the tools are that are out there, the digital tools, nothing beats sort of sitting around in a room. Now, having to then, how that translates to retention and recruiting is striking the right balance with the teams, and saying, here's what we're going to do, and here's what we're not going to do, and here's how we're going to try and respect these new sort of set of rules and boundaries that people have come to appreciate, certainly. And I think all of us will see that there's been some benefits there. But what's that right balance, and striking that balance at a pace that matches sort of the broader market, number one, but also helping to the teams, the employees here and elsewhere, that isn't sort of a shock to the system that causes them to immediately go out and start looking elsewhere. But again, I think the pendulum has swung back enough where it's pretty easy to have those conversations now. It's just a matter of what is the right balance and how does that translate through to retention. So I think near term, for us, it's continuing to find what works, what's the right balance. We'll be announcing some things, sort of even just, in fact, I got a company meeting today. We're going to be talking about sort of next week or next month or next year's initiatives and what we're wanting to do. And we're going to be asking for some feedback. And part of that is the, in person. And one of the big reminders that I tell everybody is it's not necessarily just about you. It's about people who need you to be there too. You need to help them. They need some guidance from you. They need some feedback from you. And that's really easy to do when you're sitting next to each other. It's not as easy to do over Slack or Zoom or whatever that is. And then I think longer term is just where does that pendulum settle? And is it sort of 50-60% in the office? Is it back in person? Is it, I don't know. I think we're all trying to figure out what that's going to look like. So that's the bigger retention challenge and recruiting challenge for us now than it is sort of wages and out of control expectations there.
So to follow up on that, and certainly that that's a huge, I don't think anyone sitting in your seats, respective seats, really feels like they've got that perfected. But it seems like from, we talk to, we have more, a couple hundred agency and agency-like clients who we speak to regularly. We have probably equal to double that as in terms of prospective partners, and everyone seems to be settling into some type of hybrid model. The Along with that, putting that aside, sort of that operation toolkit modality, what when you're talking about going to a planning meeting, what large or sort of focused operational or maybe technology investments are you teeing up for 2024 in how you really run, measure, service clients, for instance, in your respective agency?
Yeah, good, all good questions. I mean, I think so we are in a hybrid model as well. So we have our own offices just outside of DC, down in Durham, North Carolina, Boulder, Colorado, and then we share some space with another agency in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But more than a third, almost half, right, the company is fully remote or works remotely most of the time. So we are a classic hybrid, world. We also traditionally have done two full in-person retreats every year where we get everybody together in the same location. We had to pause the fall one this year, and so it's we basically are kind of doing the best practices for running a remote company and for running an in-person company, which adds up to a lot of expense. So trying to think about how to do that more efficiently, so we're not overspending on some of those things. In terms of collaboration cadence and tools, I mean, we have a rich tradition of communication cadence between our weekly staff meeting that doubles as sort of a social connection point, our quarterly meetings that again twice a year are a larger retreat, and an annual one that turns into a major kind of culture event every year. Those things work really well, and then our communication cadence among projects being very much remote first, so making sure that we can collaborate across offices and which is something we've done for 15 years now. Well before COVID, we kind of flexed those muscles. So all of our collaboration communication tools are remote first. But to Andrew's point, there is nothing like getting together in person, collaborating with clients. So whenever we can, with clients that are open to it, we're leveraging our office spaces for hosting, kickoff meetings or key collaboration points. I still think that's really important. I also think for younger people that will be hiring, or people earlier in their career, that don't have a professional network established, that don't have as much experience, haven't been mentored, the ability to learn and grow and experience good mentorship in person it's just going to be dramatically better. So it's not to say that every person starting out their career needs to be in an office, but I think that would be preferable for their professional development, and I would imagine for their kind of social experience that agencies are famous for, right? Like people join the agency environment in part because it's it can be super enjoyable and fun in ways that are go beyond just a paycheck. So we're trying to find the right balance for that. Our tools and things. I mean, to Andrew's point, I still think that we tend to kind of start in the spreadsheet world and really try to break down the problems that we're trying to understand with raw data and the basics first. And that process of kind of building things out with internal tools and basic technology, I think helps you understand the problems better, helps you spot the real metrics that you're trying to keep track of and make sense from, and then using that to then decide, okay, we're going to invest in a certain tool that's going to give us better analysis ongoing. So I still love that part of my job, is kind of digging in on the key metrics that I care most about. And right now, I mean, obviously it's a lot of it revenue forecasting. Where is every dollar going to come from for the next 12 months? Existing clients, new clients, that kind of thing. And then for the existing staff, it's all about utilization. I mean, ultimately, if you're not billing on a client project as a billable resource at the right level, nothing else is going to work. I mean, obviously, you got to think about what your rates are and how that adds up to the right revenue result. But keeping close eye on utilization is always been part of our our secret. And if anything, I think that's one of the things we analyzed this year is we kind of got away from that. And so we're kind of redoubling those efforts for 2024 to really keep a closer eye on billable utilization of really every individual within the company.
Brent, if I can just add one thing to what Brian just said, because I think it's really a great point is, everybody went into COVID in a different way. Brian and Vigit had already been hybrid in a lot of ways and remote or, in different offices. So it was part of their DNA going into it. I think for companies such as Struck that had a single office that, it had two offices at one point in time, but right before that had decided to consolidate. It was a lot harder because part of the culture that was built was this in person. And so to then go to full remote and then to come back, it's a little bit of just finding ourselves. And I would suspect, and then I've also talked to people who have started businesses during, sort of in COVID or right after COVID, and they're fully remote. And that's great because they started that way. They have that as part of their initial DNA. So I would suspect that that's something that a lot of agencies that really relied on part of that in person as part of culture, it's part of the way that we do business, have struggled more than those who had it was part of what they did beforehand. And so I think there's a lot of figuring out from some folks such as Struck that we've had to do that others, it was a muscle that they already had, at least flexed to some degree, and it was a little easier transition for them.
No, that's great. That makes sense. And I think, we've done several of these with Soda. We've done these with other peer and collaborative agency type networks, certainly talk to a lot of our own clients and our prospective clients. And I think there's this theme of certainly coming out of COVID, a lot of resilience, shops that swore up and down, we have got to be in the same room to collaborate and concept and iterate on the creative process, have settled on kind of that middle space. Like there is significant work that can be done remote, but there really is no substitution for the energy and collaboration. So we've got to kind of strike that balance, and then certainly getting down to the essentials of profitability. Agencies are universal in the sense that people are essentially a product, right? So applying them the right time, the right place, the right margin, right utilization to make some money, so that the agency can thrive is essential. So that seems kind of in line with what we're hearing in the market. And along those lines, so we get a lot of market indicators and certainly listen quite a bit to the existing clients as well as partners, and we have the benefit of as well, like talking a lot to the management consulting space and seeing these indicators. Most I think feel there's a sentiment that some client spend rebound occurring at or around mid-year next year. What's interesting I've always found about this space is that we're more or less bellwethers, right? I mean, when clients begin to economize, of course, consulting and marketing spend can be reduced before they start cutting into their own headcount. But conversely, when things start to pick up again, the agency world sort of feels it first. What, maybe Brian, start with you. What do you sense with your current clients as you're getting into 2024 planning? And of course, we're recording this here on December 14th, and there was the Fed, Jerome JP noted that rates were more or less frozen, and we can begin to maybe appreciate the potential possibility of some rate cuts next year, going down up to 75 basis points. So clear kind of signal to the market. But what from your clients, what are you sensing if you had to throw a dart or cast a wager for some moderate spend increase?
Yeah, I think what I go back to the word Andrew used of uncertainty. To me, interest rates don't have to be dramatically lower as much as it just needs to be clear what they will be, so that businesses can price in whatever the cost of money is going to be, and then evaluate various initiatives accordingly. When there's low cost of capital and you can invest in new innovation projects, agencies like ours that often come in to help with those initiatives can do really well. We can pivot in our world of software development into tools that help clients save money. So it's still a capital cost, but it's a way to lower their ongoing costs, particularly when the cost of people can be so high. So there's I still think there's opportunities on either track. And we are seeing clients probably just be a little bit more realistic about saying, okay, I can't just freeze, spending forever. My competitors are going to leapfrog me if I do that. So now I understand a little bit more what the cost is for these projects. And now I can kind of stack rank things and prioritize things better and have real strategic discussions about what is worth a certain level of investment. And we can get into that. So I think on a macro level, we'll see things get out of that uncertainty, chaos that we had this year, where it's just hard to make decisions, and we'll start to see some decision making that'll lead to some reasonable work. On a more micro level, we're also seeing this return to office thing create an opportunity for us. We're seeing some clients who have a return to office mandate in their hiring practices, and they're struggling with that. And so as a stopgap, they're able to leverage agency talent to kind of address the near-term work opportunities while they're ramping back up their recruiting muscles and that sort of thing. That's an interesting opportunity, because I think there's also a sense of anxiety around rehiring. Companies, you're talking about companies and people managers that are pretty high up in organizations that have never gone through layoffs, just because the tech boom cycle was over a decade. And so now you have people that have gone through this downturn and the stress associated with letting people go, not to mention the buildup of stress prior to that of recruiting and hiring in a very demanding environment from a culture and HR and kind of professional development environment. Like that there was a lot that went into people management. And so when you kind of add that up to, we're struggling to hire in office, and man, it's so nice and easy to just bring in an agency that can quickly execute on a challenging opportunity without any recruiting, onboarding, HR, performance reviews, one-on-ones, all the stuff that goes into managing a great team. It's pretty appealing. And even though the cost obviously is a different equation, I think that will create opportunities for agencies that are willing to work in that way, sort of an adjacent to existing teams. So I don't know. I think there's some opportunity there that we're seeing. So we're cautiously optimistic, and our numbers for the first part of next year are certainly looking stronger than than the latter half of this year. So yeah, that's some reason for optimism. I'm not ready to hang up the mission accomplished sign just yet, but we're seeing some of that, and that's what I'm hearing from other folks. Although I haven't caught up with Andrew lately, so maybe he's got a different point of view.
Yeah, Andrew, how about you? What with your ear to the tracks, what kind of signals are you hearing from both your clients and prospects?
Whether it's a blip or it's a little more of a trend, our last couple of months have certainly been busier in terms of new business coming in. And even some that we haven't won, but it's people are asking, people are wanting to start to spend. I think the big difference, and this goes back to what Brian said earlier about 2008. 2008, people didn't have money in the bank account. So when they started to turn back on the spend, they had to spend a little to make a little bit more, to then spend a little bit more, to then make a little bit more. And so it took a while to come out of that. By and large, people are sitting on piles of cash right now. Not everybody, but there's a lot of companies that are sitting on a lot of cash. So the minute they decide they want to start spending again, they can. And I think that's what at least I'm starting to see, is that people are saying, okay, we've sat on the sidelines. We can only sit on the sidelines, especially when it comes to what we do as creative. We can only reuse creative for so long before it starts to become not as useful, not as strong, and there becomes some fatigue in the market. And so we're seeing a bit of that, and I think that it's gonna be a bit of a slow roll until I believe, and this is my maybe it's just my optimism, is that there's going to start to be some new creative hitting the market in different markets and different segments, and it's going to create this, oh no, we better get going. And it could lead to a second half of next year that could be incredibly strong for agencies, because between the stuff that, you know, Brian mentioned in terms of just the more short term, we need some staff right now, but also bigger initiatives that the agencies are always hired for. It could be a really strong second half of the year going into the you know, into 2025. Because again, the cash is there. We do know that. It's just a matter of they decide to actually open up the vault and start spending it.
That's good. So it's, you know, the consensus from both of you is sort of cautious, pragmatic optimism, but, you know, the big difference being, to your point, in the 2008 crisis, just the absence of cash and kind of the lockup of the system and access to cash and capital. Here,
Yeah.
the capital exists. It's just a more cautious spend behavior exhibited by the clients. But, you know, mid-year looking good, and then you're already seeing kind of an uptick. So that's, I think, you know, for the folks who are participating today, you know, I'd be curious to hear what others are seeing, but that seems to be at least a pretty good sentiment, pretty good consensus across the board.
I mean, honestly, for those who are watching right now, I mean, I'd just be curious in the chat if people are seeing an up, you know, just an up arrow, down arrow, or a flat arrow, because it is something that, like I said, we're seeing. I'm not going to call it a trend yet because it's only a couple of months, and so it could just be some end of year or some, you know, some things. So I don't want to, like Brian said, I'm not ready to make big statements, but I am curious to know if this is something that everybody's seeing as a little bit of a thawing in the market.
Yeah, that'd be great. In the research, and that, you know, this is a sort of very tight, compressed type of pulse check on the market, but a lot of the agency principals responded, talked about technology, and of course, you know, Vijay, you know, Brian, you're kind of pure technologist. I mean, most of the SOTA agencies have at least a pretty significant technological footprint. We've canvassed a few partners, and I've participated in a few of these seminars, and of course, AI comes up, and a bit, I think, in a different context than maybe previous sort of hype cycles of technology. You know, thinking back to NFTs and the things like blockchain and distributed ledgers and so forth, and the impact on the environment. But as it pertains to the agency business, whether you're kind of a generalist creative comms or more of software, product design, product development, I've been surprised at the velocity, I think, of adoption, even with some nascent or clients, agency types who might not consider themselves more technologists. Maybe they play more in the strategy realm. And, you know, we've seen adoption in kind of this planning and strategy function, of course, in the content arena with you know, platforms like Jasper. Creative and production seem like just ripe for things like adaptation and using all the tools at disposal there. Development, there's been some interesting tools, and of course, media, I think, has been using, you know, machine learning and some predictive propensity models for quite some time. So seeing those refine. But I'd love to hear in your shops respectively, where are you placing some AI bets? And then, you know, there'll be a follow-up where we'll talk a little bit about this in the client context, but I'd love to hear your view on that. What disciplines, maybe some tools, how you're using it to enhance productivity, if at all.
I'll go first, Andrew.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I think creative agencies and technical agencies like ours, by definition, we have to be early adopters, or at least early evaluators of trends and technologies. Kind of it's a big part of the value we bring to our clients. So it's absolutely just baked into our DNA. The way we think is constantly internally talking about what these new tools are and where these trends are going. And I would say Viget is a little bit more takes a skeptical eye. You mentioned things like NFTs and blockchain and things. I mean, we were a little bit more of a skeptical shop, not jumping on the latest trends all the time, not retooling and repositioning ourselves to be like the agency for X, where X is some new trend. And I think that's part of what's provided a lot of stability and longevity. We've probably missed some opportunities to take off like a rocket ship, but that's okay with me. We're much more about long term than the short term. We last summer, as part of our quarterly check-ins, we did an exercise to look at AI trends in three categories. One was the tools that we use and how those tools will evolve, either literally new tools popping up that didn't exist that are entirely based on AI, or where we kind of landed on it was tools that are going to kind of bake in AI functionality, and we'll kind of slowly boil the frog with that. And that seems to be where things are going. So, whether it's the Google Suite or tools like Zoom or Notion, kind of Figma, building those AI enhancements into the tooling. I think that's great, and we will adapt as we do with any kind of software along those lines. The second category was tools that we're building, and software opportunities where there was questions of, do we need to hire certain skill sets to be able to tackle this stuff more? Our approach to software development has always been very much an open source, API driven, like connected, bringing pieces together that already exist. And the sense there was, no, most of the functionality will build into software that clients are hiring us to build. We're going to be able to incorporate the AI functionality via cloud-based tools and integration points. And so that was encouraging in the sense that we aren't going to have to completely rethink the way we approach software development. And the third category was roles that we have and how AI is going to impact either individual skill sets that we've developed and sell to clients, or the approach to staffing. And the big thing there was thinking about junior, kind of early career people, where if you take like development tasks that traditionally you might bring on an early career developer, let them kind of go rework a ton of data or go investigate some new approach to something, where it's a great learning opportunity for them. They're not generating a ton of value, but they're gaining really valuable experience. Well, now you're seeing a lot of that happen through AI tools. Similarly with like writing, and I use ChatGPT all the time. It's basically like a partner, a collaboration partner. Like, hey, let me think about this, research that, give me some feedback on that sort of thing. Super valuable for that sort of thing. But it's basically cutting off what would have been traditionally a collaboration point with another human being within the organization. The downstream impact of that is going to be a lack of development of young talent, I think. And so that's going to be an area that'll impact agencies and clients down the line. So I think we're going to have to be proactive about the impact that has. But those are kind of the three things that we thought about and that we kind of continue to keep an eye on, that seem relevant.
And Andrew, how about you?
I'm going to steal one of Brian's words now, the skeptic. I mean, I think I've been most of this really light blonde, or some will call it gray hair, has come from all the different swings and the new trends and the new tools and new technologies that always end up being incredibly important. But early on, there tends to be this over exaggeration or over indexing on this is what it is. I liken a little bit what we're hearing from clients right now to, years ago, it was like, hey, we need a viral video. Well, what does that actually mean? What do you actually need? What are we trying to solve? And I think that's where we're hearing from people like, we've got to integrate with AI. What do we got to do with AI? Okay, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you needing? And so I think it's a little bit of let's just make sure that we're implementing right. We're experimenting where we can, and trying things out because we need to understand it. We have to, of course. For us, of course, we're a much more visual and creative studio. So, we have been using the tools, but we've spent a lot of time, even, brought in our attorney just to make sure, our intellectual property attorney, to give us some, very strong advice on what we should and shouldn't be using some of these visual AI tools for. So absolutely ideation, absolutely, storyboards and mood boards and, those kinds of things. But when it comes to a final delivered product, we need to be very much in control of that, so we don't put ourselves and our clients in jeopardy. I think that's the next big thing. We're already seeing it. There's some massive lawsuits out there happening when it comes to imagery. These companies that have made their living over their whole time off of protecting the intellectual property are not going to go quietly, and they shouldn't. Right? That's one of the things. I think that's where you look at like the Adobe tool is trying to start to solve that, saying, hey, we know that we own where we're pulling this from. So, where I see part of, the future, at least where we're going to be involved when it comes to AI, is going to be more sandboxed experiences of AI, and it's taking assets that they know that they've created or we've created for them that they own, and some of that imagery that might even be served up on a dynamic basis to their customers, whether it be in banners or whatever, but it's coming from their own assets. So they know that they own those assets, and they now they can see what the moods are like, what the look and feel are like, which really comes back to making sure it's very important that people have a strong brand and a strong style guide, so they don't deviate too far from it, such that when AI is taking a look and trying to pull some imagery, particularly if they get to the point where they're letting it go direct to their customers, before it's reviewed again, kind of on a personalized basis, but they don't have these weird outliers that all of a sudden some imagery that comes up that just does not match what their brand is at all. So that's where I see, from a creative perspective, and that's coming. That's already starting, and we're seeing that. But I am, watching everything. We are watching everything. I'm encouraging the team to dive in and use and learn and experiment, early, often, and come with ideas. And we have a weekly learning. There's kind of people come and share their learnings and their way that they're experiencing things, particularly with AI, and that's been very useful so far.
The IP point you brought up is massive, and I think that's really interesting and not an immediate, beyond the novelty and beyond sort of, to your point, the trendiness. I do think AI, AI has been a part of the agency landscape for quite some time, even, more on the performance media side. We've all used it, RankBrain, started with some machine learning components, and then certainly some of the media tools. But the thought of an enterprising sort of junior producer, art director, or research analyst, someone on the strategy team, just uploading reams of client IP into an engine and kind of unleashing it to the wild is something that really is key. And it's good on you for bringing in and consulting with IP counsel. On the flip side, what I'd love to hear as we get to the end of our hour here is, related to client spend, and we're seeing some activity in the chat. It looks like Melanie said that they are seeing some increase in brand awareness campaigns over media. So a little bit of uptick there. When we go to clients inevitably purchasing, potentially procurement, have you experienced yet any challenges or opportunity or directives from clients? Not so much help us be experts in AI and how it's going to influence our marketing stack and our tactics. I'm going to assume both Vidget and Instruct, you're able to do that and counsel with clients. But when it comes to purchasing, are there any challenges or pressures from the clients where they're saying, tell us how AI is going to help you make us more efficient, and translate that to investment and spend? Any of that yet?
I think we're seeing a bit of more like, asking what types of tools we're using to be as efficient as we can, so the client is certain to be getting as much value as they can. So things like, using tools to capture notes and action items out of a virtual meeting, where 5 years ago you'd have a project manager or whomever capturing all that manually and paying some sort of hourly rate for that. The savvy client will ask about whether, what they're paying for there. Or on the developer side, am I getting some value out of AI tools that I hear can help developers write code 10 times faster, or whatever the largely nonsensical point of view is. But like there's some good questions being had there. And now I think that's an opportunity for education, explain to the client what tools are ready and which aren't. But again, to me, like that's part of the business, and it's the evolution we've gone through for 20 some years in our business, is a good client. You want a client that's engaged and paying attention to these things and understands what the tools and trends are, who can ask a good question about, oh, I heard I could use these open source libraries, to build this interface layer using something like React. Do you guys use those libraries or not? Or are you writing it from scratch? And being able to talk about that 10 years ago or whatever the time frame was, is not that different now. So I think those are healthy pressures, as long as you have reasonable clients that recognize that, you might hear some hype about certain tools that help you do things a certain way that dramatically faster, increase productivity significantly. And it's not always true, but there's usually some balance there.
I'd agree in terms of a lot of it comes down to just that more pragmatic, practical use of AI. It is the virtual assistant listening in and giving you the notes from your meeting, stuff like that. That if you help them to understand, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, thank you so much, it's great. I think the other piece is, we've had people ask us, some of those questions, and we said, look, we're happy to help you explore that, but what sort of budget do you want to put towards that at this point in terms of exploration for your particular business? And typically people are saying, well, let's get back to you on that. We're not quite there yet. And I think, they'll want to get there, but I think also AI is getting layered into everything already. So the tools that they are already using will likely, if they aren't already, of course, whatever the client is, will start to have AI baked into it anyway. And so they won't have to worry as much of what their investment, might be in terms of building something or having to develop a way to harness it just themselves. And so I think that, that'll be a piece of it as well. It's just they're going to start to see the benefits of it regardless, because whatever tools they are already licensing or processes that they're already using technology for, will just have it in for them if it's not already starting.
So sounds like from your experience, it's more you're helping clients. You're definitely biased over on the expertise side, helping them get smart about the platforms, sharing where it makes sense in either the MarTech stack, ultimately the creative and strategic product. There's some utility there, to your point, around collecting notes and research, but not you haven't really encountered yet maybe that procurement team with the saying, really sharpen the pencil down to a razor. We'd like to see massive headcount reductions in some of these statement of work because we know you can do things faster.
We're not seeing that. I mean, yeah, but again, I mean, that will come in the form of healthy competitive marketplace, right? Agencies that somehow are adopting AI faster or can work so much better, more quickly, all those kinds of things will come along and eat our lunch if we're not being smart about how we're adopting those. So agencies that aren't thinking that way and recognizing that competition is coming, and embracing it like we always have, yeah, you're gonna struggle. But for companies like Strzok and Viget, I mean, we've been around long enough. We have a lot to lose by over betting on, and over promising on what these different tools can use. Whereas the upstarts can try things out. If it fails, oh well, they're on to the next. So it's part of being an established agency is to be savvy about how how quickly you're adopting those things and evaluating them. And so I think, I welcome it. I think it's a lot of exciting trends. I think there's lots of really, really powerful stuff that's going to happen. I think I think the ultimate impact is not going to be job loss and a dystopian nightmare. It's going to be huge productivity gains, and everybody that's good at adopting tools the right way will gain in that productivity and benefit from it. So, yeah, I'm an optimist for that. Although I guess there is the dystopian, Terminator 2 level take over the world type stuff, but that seems a little bit unrealistic.
Great.
No, it sounds great. And listen, it's been a great discussion, and always I think our participants, I think SOTA puts out great content. We're happy to bolster this conversation with this content that we share today, which I encourage participants to download. But great to hear from some veterans, but some real forward-thinking perspectives in the space, both on where you think 2024 is going to go, investments in technology, capability, adaptation. I'd say, where I sit, certainly on the technology side, but working with a lot of agencies and consultancies, is just tremendous resilience through these bumpy times, and just kind of a hallmark of the space. So I appreciate the time and the insights, and share with you kind of some, I guess, some Yuletide hope and cheer that spends will rebound, and maybe Jerome gave us a little bit of a little Christmas miracle in the Fed minutes yesterday. We'll see how that pans out. But thanks guys. It's been really good.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you all for joining. As a reminder, we'll share the recording along with any information and contact details for future discussions. Have a great day.
Thanks, Lakai. See you guys.
See ya.